All right, Kopano, welcome to News at Prime. Pleasure to have you on the show. Let's talk about the Business Confidence Index today that came out reflecting the business climate and recognizes some of the economic developments and the bearing that they have on the mood in the country.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for the warm introduction. The Business Confidence Index is exactly that. It's a reflection of the business mood and the business environment. And although this time it ticked up slightly from the last reporting period, it does say that there has been the lowest business confidence in South Africa since the 1980s. Now, to put that into perspective, during the riots and the economic unrest of the 1980s, business confidence was still higher than it was in 2020. We spoke to the CEO, Alan Mukoki, who said that this is what he would like to hear and what the business community would like to hear in SONA tomorrow.
What we need to hear from the president is what is he going to do in terms of structural reform. Yes, we've heard the story of the Economic Recovery and Reconstruction Program, but here's what we mean by structural reform. Number one, what are we going to do specifically around the idea of creating a meritocracy in the public sector? For us to resolve the issues of hunger, unemployment, and inequality, our ambition and our bold, big ambition ought to be the one that says, in the next 20 years, or in the next 25 years, or 30 years, we are going to be able to move South Africa from a developing economy to becoming a developed economy. Non-Western countries have actually managed to do that. And amongst those, you count Japan, Taiwan, Singapore, South Korea, old Hong Kong, Israel, Australia, and Russia. And if you look at what those countries have done, the majority of them did not have the mineral resources endowment that we as South Africa have. But they relied on improving and being very aggressive and being uncompromising when it came to the building of the human capital index and capability.
All right, the National Treasury, Kopano, also finding itself in hot water with the Auditor General, and this is over fruitless and wasteful expenditure. It's going to be hard for the minister to talk tough when his own department can't get it right.
That's exactly right. There's 250 million rand in wasteful, fruitful and irregular expenditure that the National Treasury had to account for. The Auditor General found this and reported it to Parliament yesterday. The National Treasury are now reporting that they're working on it. They're trying to find the source of it and to plug the gaps. And this is what they had to say when they responded to Parliament today.
We have made an improvement in terms of the reduction of the actual irregular expenditure to the tune of just over 20%, over 25%, sorry, year on year in the actual irregular expenditure occurred year on year. The other material issue in terms of the actual misstatements, which also has been elevated by Auditor General, was on the financial statements in the disclosure on certain balances. And these largely relate to the advances and payable, which were understated by 12.96 million, for the Neighborhood Development Partnership Grant, which was retained by GTEC since 2012 and 13, 148.8 million in terms of unspent funds for the Jobs Fund.
And of course, some news out of AXA as well, Kopano. They've been one of the better performing SOEs, but I suppose they haven't been immune to some of the difficulties that the entire aviation sector is facing. Selling off assets, is that the best decision for them right now?
That is what they say they need to do. The AXA, the Airports Company of South Africa, say that they're looking to sell off 4.5 billion rand worth of assets, non-core assets to be specific. They say that the COVID-19 impact and the grounding of flights has really put a strain on their balance sheet, and they really need to just tighten their ship a little in order to keep going and to pay salaries and to fund everybody. We spoke to an analyst earlier, and this is what he had to say about the sale.
Obviously now they've had to change the way in which they do things. They've had to cut down on operating expenses. Bonuses haven't been paid out. Increases haven't been put into place for some of their staff members. And I guess this is just another one of those things that they have to do in selling non-core assets. So will they be able to sell it remains to be seen. But I do think if I'm a buyer and I think that the world is likely to return to some level of normality in future, granted it may not happen this year, but in future, I do think planes will take to the skies again. People are itching to travel. I know I'm itching to travel. So I do think if I'm a buyer and I think about the world returning to some level of normality, and I'm flush with liquidity and I take a long-term view, then I would see this as an opportunity to get my hands on some assets at a lower price than I would ordinarily get my hands on these assets at in a normal environment. So I do think there'll be get buyers.
Right, let's take a look at how the markets performed today. Right, so let's take a look at your sports news coming up next.